Well, we're back. We're back. Let me say this. This is a very powerful, powerful woman, Dr. Adelaide Sanford. And in this next clip, next segment, we're going to be talking to her about her role as a regent. All right. Now, in New York City, not New York City, New York State, the regent sets policy for all the schools in New York State. And she's going to talk to you about her role as a regent, how important that job is, and how she became the vice chancellor of regents. So as a person of African ancestry, as she has taught us, she went to the highest level held the highest level of office for a person of color or a person of African ancestry as vice chancellor of the Board of Regents. So in this clip, she's going to talk about her experience, racism she encountered, and legacy. So I was speaking to you earlier about how there are principals who I've met, who I know personally, who are brilliant in terms of their understanding of pedagogy and what our children need. But their fear paralyzes them from taking the route of being the prisoner as opposed to understanding that you're going to have enemies. What is your message to principals who sit, because this has such a significant impact on our children, and I can tell you from my own personal experience that when you come into these schools, a lot of times you're faced with the choice of either being the change agent, aligning yourself with the community and really educating our children, or making alliances and networking your way up through the system at the expense of our children. So what is your message to those principals who sit in that valley of indecision?
I would ask them, well, first place, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of losing your job? Unless somebody can give you a U rating because it's pedagogically unsound, you probably won't lose your job. But on the other hand, you're losing your soul. And that's infinitely more important. So if you're really that afraid, I would say it's not for you. It's not something that everybody can do. And if you're that afraid, or if you're afraid of people not speaking to you, it's not the job for you. You'll have to be able to go in there. That's one of the reasons I think there's value in staying a while. I stayed at 21 more than 20 years. It takes a while. It takes a while to build the relationships so that a part of what you want taught, you don't have to say it. Your parents will say it. They used to tell the parents, oh, we know what Sanford told you to say today. That's what they say at the school board. I said, good, I wish you had come by and had a chat with me so I could tell you some things too. Because I wasn't going to back off the fact that a part of what you do is you teach parents. You can't do much about helping children if you don't work with the parents of those children, because they have power that you don't have. Once the parents got the information, they were fearless. What could they lose? They had nothing to lose. Their children were on a half day. They had 3/4 of the teachers were white. The principal was white. She came from a gymnastic background. You know, what did the parent have to lose? So you put the power where there's less possibility of the fear. But if you're that fearful, I say, it's really not for you.
So with that being said, because we're talking a lot about systems thinking, and we have a new chancellor in the New York City Department of Education, who has come on and is already he appears to be focused on issues of equity. So recently he has been raising the issue of specialized high schools and caused some controversy in the sense that he's saying that he wants to do away with the test and find other ways in which to evaluate whether, how a student gets into a specialized high school. When I did my research, I found out that while Black and Latinos make up over 70% of the students in New York City Department of Education, they are less than 10% of the students that are in these specialized high schools. So this is what the chancellor has been talking about. So he's coming in, he's talking about culturally relevant education. And at some point I want to get your take on these terms: restorative justice, equity in education. What is your advice to the chancellor as he begins to serve his first year as chancellor of New York City Department of
To
Education?
define equity. And that definition should come from the people who have not been treated with equity. I wouldn't ask a European to define equity because they don't know enough about inequity. You got to suffer the pain to know what it's like. So define equity. It's one thing to say they're not in the specialized high schools. That's easier than looking at the elementary and secondary schools that prepare the children. That's much more difficult, but that's what's basic. It's not just getting them into a specialized high school as though a specialized high school is something extraordinary for every Black child to try to get into. You know, the Asians are raising some concern about that.
Yes, they are.
But the issue is, what does equity look like in education? And until we define that, working at the fringe of getting more, I think that they should go to the specialized high schools, but I think when they go there, there should be some representation of who they are, not go there just to learn what white children learn. So I think the issue is, what does equity look like? What would equity look like? And I think it's for us to define.
How would you advise him to lead New York City public schools?
To ask, like the group that you're taking there, to ask them to define equity. What would equity look like on their terms? Mm-hmm. Not a piece of it, of the specialized high schools, or, would it say something about textbooks? Would it say something about African and African American history required for teachers? Would it say something about what is happening in the criminal justice system? Would it say something about housing inadequacies, health inadequacies? Certainly curriculum inadequacies. Our children don't even know about their own bodies.
So I know that you were unanimously elected 7-year term as a member at large to the Board of Regents of New York State in 1986. And then you were reelected a second 7-year term in 1993 and a 5-year term in 2000. In March 2001, you were elected to the position of Vice Chancellor of the Board of Regents. And you have served on the Committee for Low Performing Schools and Chair of the Committee of Higher Education and Chair of the Committee on Professions. I want to talk a little bit about policy. Before I do that, can you explain to the audience who may not know what is the work of a regent?
I'm embarrassed to think that there would be educators that wouldn't know. But I can tell you that almost every time I've spoken to them and I've asked them, who is your regent? Who's the regent for your judicial district? What decisions do they make? They don't know. If you don't know what screw holds the bolt in place, not much you're going to do about it. The Board of Regents is more than 200 years old. It is an elected position. You are elected by the people in the Senate and the Assembly in Albany. So it's political. It is a non-paid position. You have no office, you have no telephone, you have no staff, you have no driver. You get a pittance for food for any activity that is Regents related. If you go to speak to parents about discipline, you will not get that lunch money. You have to go to speak about something about the Regents. So they almost filter your work. Originally, Regents served for life, then 7 years. Now they're down to 5.
And this work of the Regents, because you said something about the teachers, about giving them support, but you can't say that you have effective teachers and have a failing school or failing groups of students. Now I know that had to influence some of your policy making decisions on the state level, because I know that when we talk about a lot of the reform, whether it be nationally or what was happening in New York State, the whole issue of teacher accountability or tying teacher performance to student achievement
It's a great issue.
it's a fight. We know it's a fight, but it's an idea that has been presented that wasn't previously presented.
Well, how I did that was I took the form, the form that's the rating sheet for teachers.
Yes.
Went over every instance and told what it meant. Now, when it says, do you relate to parents? What does that mean? When it says your appearance, it said you come to me dressed in clothing. If you look like you're going to the beach, you will not get a satisfactory rating because appearance is on this rating sheet. And you come to me, appear to me as a professional. So I took every item so that they knew what was expected of them. You have to show some improvement in attendance, in interest in the work, in creativity. You have to show something. What's the evidence of your... Now, midterm, they got an evaluation, so they had some idea. You've got to improve in this area or you will not get a satisfactory. It is not automatic. You will not get teacher money, extra money, because you came to school. That's not it. So they had a case before them that they had to answer. Did you know that this was expected of her? Did you understand that? And they couldn't say no because they had signed that they had read it and that we had had this conference. So the Board of Regents is the oldest policy-making entity in the United States. It is one of the few states that has...
Not New York State, United States.
In the United States, because it has higher ed, it's got regular ed, it's got 51 professions, libraries, museums, archival material, and it has that breadth of work that people don't know about. We are in charge of museums and libraries and archival material. And we're in charge of public television and public radio. But if you don't know that, and if you don't know that you cannot be promoted or graduate without meeting the standards that are set by the Board of Regents, we also have to understand that regents make policy, but they have no money. And that because of that, you can make all kinds of statements that are noble. All children can learn. But you don't get a budget. You've got to go back to the governor and the municipal facilities on the state level to get the budget. Now, there's some things we could do. For example, we are required to see that all children get a sound, basic education. Now, what constitutes a sound basic education? Does it include music? Does it include art? The definition of what constitutes a sound, basic education is one that has never been outlined to the public by the Board of Regents because they don't want them to know. Now, when there was a decision being discussed about the report cards, and I pointed out that on the report card, it should say your child is entitled to a sound basic education. And the Board of Regents agreed, that parents should know that. So that if your child is on a half day, what kind of sound basic education are they getting? If you have no music, if you have no art, if the textbooks are outdated, if the globes and maps are outdated. The law department of the Board of Regents said you can't put that on there because it will open suits against the Board of Regents for not supplying it. So in many instances, they don't want you to know what your rights are because you will activate them. So that's one of the things that I had to do as a region. One of the first things I did, I prepared material with the names of all the regions, their judicial district, which is different from your assembly district, your congressional district, or your any other district. It stands alone. Now here a parent has sanitation district, assembly district, senatorial district, congressional district, and here you have something called a judicial district. What is that? So every borough really is a judicial district. At one time, Brooklyn and Staten Island was together, but finally Staten Island separated, and now they have 17 regions instead of 16 because they have their own region. But what do you know about a judicial district? Who's in it? Who's in charge of it? So when you become a teacher and a principal and even a parent and you don't have that information, you are licked because you're fussing with a level that can't do what you want. You've got to function at a state level. You've got to know who the regent is. You have to know that they have your interests. We couldn't even get anybody to go to the regent's meeting. Now, every other group, they have advocates, they have lobbyists, they have people who were there who come back and...
Right now to this day, this happens.
That's right. We had no one.
I want to switch focus, and I want to talk to you a little bit about legacy.
Legacy?
Legacy.
Don't know too much about legacy.
Two organizations that you have been deeply involved with. I've had the opportunity of interacting with the dynamic individuals in those organizations. One is the Adelaide Sanford Institute. And I've had an opportunity to go to the conferences, just be a part of the professional development, and also really one of the things that was most impressive is the parent engagement. I went to a boys and girls high school on a Saturday. Dr. Sanford, it was a blistering cold Saturday. And I walked into the room, and there must have been about 150 parents packed in the library, and they were deeply engaged in conversations like the one we're having right now. And then the other organization is the Henry Clark House. Can you tell me about, one, the mission of the Adelaide Sanford Institute, and then the Clark House, and how important those institutions are to you?
Well, actually, the Adelaide Sanford Institute is legacy because I had nothing to do with it. It was the brainchild of the Youngs. They called it the Adelaide Sanford Institute, and I'm grateful to them for it, but I had nothing to do with it. That's what legacy is. Legacy is when you move it one step past where you started. Renee started when she came right out of college. Started at 21. She stayed there till she became a principal. The reason Lester became a regent was because of his brilliance and his work, but also because of strategy. For example, I had...
And this is Dr. Renee and Dr. Lester Young.
Dr. Lester. I had some more years on the Board of Regents as a regent. I had 2 more years. But it was election time. And I knew the struggle that we had gone through when I was running to be chancellor, and how they used one of our people to write this article in the Daily News saying, if Sanford becomes chancellor, the regents will be given in Ebonics. They used us as an excuse. They weren't going to make me chancellor anyway. But I made it a public issue so people would know how the chancellor is elected. I didn't expect them to. I knew they didn't have the heart to do that. But I decided that I wanted to go out as the first black vice chancellor. So I had to leave on my own. Because if I were not elected again as vice chancellor, then I would have to leave as regent. But if I left while I was vice chancellor, I would be remembered as the first African American vice chancellor. So that was my decision. Then the question was, who can you talk to persuade to run for this position? Non-paid, a lot of insults. I mean, I would go to the Board of Regents, get out of the car. Drivers would not touch my luggage. They'd take the luggage of the other, but they wouldn't touch mine. We would go to the desk to sign in. I was the only one that they would ask for proof that I was a regent. You have to be able to take that kind of humiliation. The woman used to say in Selma, and I also have the house in Selma, people talk about, oh, you standing on my shoulders. She said, get off my shoulders and do something. Legacy is not saying, oh, I'm standing on the shoulders of great people. It's coming off those shoulders and doing something. How old am I?
Yes.
92.
92 years old.
I'll be 93 this year.
This is the legacy question. Adelaide Sanford is
a rebel.
cut. Perfect answer. Let's give Dr. Adelaide Sanford another round of applause. Dr. Sanford, I want to say it was an honor to be invited into your home and to be able to sit with you. I felt like I was sitting at the foot of a master teacher because I was. And just hearing from you, not just from your educational experience, your scholarship, your consciousness, your life experience. If anybody's had the opportunity to or have been blessed to sit with Dr. Sanford, you know that you don't just feel her knowledge, but you feel her warmth, you feel her love, you feel her commitment to her people. And I just hope that I can do half. If I can just do half of what she did in my way, then I feel like I would have accomplished something. So you heard a lot today. And what I want to do is I want to not set this up. I just want to get impressions now. What was the thing that stood out to you the most from what you heard from Dr. Adelaide Sanford? And this time we're going to go to a young person, because only two young people in this room. That's me. No, but we're going to go to a young person and we're going to get a sense of what her words meant to the next generation, because we have to move the agenda forward, not stand on her shoulders. She said, get on your own square and move this thing forward. So we're going to go to this young lady right here. Can you tell us your name? And what was your impression?
Okay, my name is Shanika, and my impression and what stood out to me was the fact that she said you need welcoming environments to go into with schools, and how you walk in and they say a lot of do not do this and don't go here and things like that. And also what stood out to me was the fact that she said police, we don't get the same treatment as other people when it comes to police and kids feeling safe. And I feel like that goes off of her saying the fact that we're not taught our history, that means everybody else is not taught our history. So they don't get, it goes off of perspectives, because if they're not taught and we're not taught, maybe we don't know how much respect we are supposed to be getting, and maybe we just take whatever we get, or, it just goes on perspective and influences. We don't have a lot of representation. When I used to teach after school, and I had a girls group called My Sister's Keeper, and basically I wanted to, let them, have more awareness of themselves and what's going on around them. And I do agree with her as well with when she said we need to know our history and we need to do extra research before we go into, such an important role. So a lot actually stood out to me, what she said, and I definitely agree with what she said.
Can we give her a round of applause? Huh? Young people, man, you know, the future's bright. I'm just going around. We're coming to a close to the show. Anybody else have insight, want to talk about what touched them, or are you inspired to do this work on a greater level, and how? Is there anybody else who would like to share? Yes, please tell us. Please stand up and tell us your name.
I'm Novelle, and I'm a parent of a college student, high schooler, and a sixth grader. And what kind of stood out to me that I could appreciate was how parent engagement is very, very important. And a lot of times, as a parent, you don't feel welcome. And you feel like, you only come to the building to drop your child, and nobody really wants you to dig deep and get involved in what's going on. Sometimes you get that feeling at a school. And it just behooves us to, as parents, know what's going on, understand that there are ways to find out how to navigate the Board of Ed. Parent leadership conferences are given by the UFT that tells you about parent engagement and what you can do to get involved. You can be on your SLT and things like that. So we really have to seek the knowledge because nobody's going to give it to us. And a lot of times, maybe principals don't know what your motive is, you're coming there, or whatever. And it's just best for the kids that all three factors are in place and working together, parents, child, and principal, so they know, if I mess up here, then I'm accountable here. And everybody has to be accountable and just, seek the knowledge. It's there.
Thank you. And let me say this, just to your point, parents seeking the knowledge. For you parents out there, there's a wonderful program that was mentioned in that piece, the Adelaide Sanford Institute. They have this thing where they have parent leadership meetings once a month at Boys and Girls High School. You can contact the school, ask about it, reach out to the Adelaide Sanford Institute, and reach out to Dr. Renee Young. They are empowering and educating parents. Is there anybody else?
Yes.
Please tell us your name.
Hi, my name is Kanari Blake, and I work with Yonkers Public Schools as a school counselor. And what an honor to hear Dr. Sanford speak. I was taken with her take on equality in education, equality for all, and working in a high school. You don't see too many of that going on, but just being able to work within the boundaries of what you can't do, because we speak a lot about what we can't do. There's a lot that we can do, knocking on doors and not being afraid to go into the community if a parent can't come in because they're working hard, trying to put food on the table, and they just don't have the time, being able to meet them halfway. So it really takes, as the saying goes, a village to raise a child, that we all work together, and just having that welcoming environment because of what the parents spoke about, the can'ts, not being able to, go into the main office, keep the parents out. It shouldn't be like that. So I was really taken and touched by the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Blizzy.
Thank you. It's interesting. Dr. Sanford had said to me, this was not on tape, that she wants to address a conference of counselors about the social and emotional trauma that is rooted in an oppressive history and how it affects Black and Latino children. So I'll keep you informed of when we put that together, and I thank you for your comments. We have room for 2 more comments. Is there anybody else who would like to say anything? Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to close our last comment with Principal George Patterson, school leader in Brooklyn, New York.
I think I want to close out on this note. One of the most important things that I think she said that I liked was when she called into our chancellor, into his message of equity. Because often people put out these visions for us to follow, and we just want to make sure that we're following the right path. So when she said, well, he has to define equity, does that mean just the students getting into these high schools, or is it reflective in the textbooks now that they're getting? Is it reflective in the staff of these schools? Is this all the way around equity? And that really is a significant challenge. So I never thought of it. in that context. So that was very powerful. I think Adelaide Sanford is a visionary. She's extremely sagacious. Like the wisdom is just pouring out of her. You can't help but to hold her in the highest esteem. I think she's an intellectual, and I think she's an intellectual giant and a groundbreaker. And I think that of you also.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that this show, the Dr. Blizzy project, from the time it launched last year, has been doing nothing but segments as reflective as this. If this isn't seen by the masses, then something went terribly wrong. So whoever's watching needs to tell one, and they need to tell one, and we need to spread the word. These messages are too important to keep it contained and confined. This has to get out there to the masses. So we thank you, brother, for the work that you do, and I think it was by no accident that you and Adelaide Sanford were able to connect.
Thank you, and the check is in the mail. Let me say this. The two things that you said that I just want to focus on. When she talked about equity, I thought it was so powerful that she said that equity has to be defined by those who have been treated unequal, because we know what it feels like. So I would hope to the Chancellor, I would say this to you, sir, that when you engage in this conversation of equity, engage those who have been treated unequal, because then you'll really be able to define it and move your agenda forward. And speaking of that, I just want to say, September 27th, we look forward to seeing all the black educators that are coming out to Borough Manhattan Community College for a gathering of black educators. It is going to be powerful. The event is sold out. The Chancellor will be there. Dr. Blizzy will be there. Principal Patterson will be there. You will be there. And Borough President Eric Adams from Brooklyn will be there. And we'll be having and we'll be continuing this conversation around equity and what our children need. So he's going to get an opportunity to hear the advice that Dr. Adelaide Sanford gave him today. You have been a phenomenal audience. Give yourselves another round of applause. Now, DJ Cool KG, I don't know if you still with us, but if you are, man, we want to hear a little bit of music, because we're getting ready to, phase out. And as you play some music in the background, what I want to say is